Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz are serving faster at the 2025 Australian Open than ever before. And to judge the quality of a serve, it's not only about speed. In my opinion, both Djokovic and Alcaraz are also serving better, and the stats prove that. Now, very early in January, I made a video where I analyzed the changes that Carlos Alcaraz has undertaken on his serve. I made another video during the French Open in 2024 where Carlos Alcaraz started changing his serve. And that initial serve improvement during the French Open didn't really show that much improvement in the stats. However, the new Carlos Alcaraz serve has gotten rid of that small suboptimal element of his serve that was still there despite him making some good changes last year. Now there's no more late coil. He has increased the length of his take back and is coiling much sooner, and because of that he's serving much better, and he knows it. After beating Nishioka in the second round, he wrote on the camera, "Am I a serve bot?" He served 14 aces in that match, and his first serve percentage keeps rising every match he wins. In the first round it was at 59%, second round was 60%, and third round was 61%. In the second and third round, Carlos Alcaraz did not drop serve. So he's 100% serving better than he has served ever before. And I highly recommend that you check my video out where I explain in great detail how Carlos Alcaraz has transformed his serve. But in today's video, I want to talk about Novak Djokovic, who very early in his career had suboptimal technical elements on his serve. And his serve back in those days wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. Novak's serve was very different from what it is today. So he had more of a full lag with his arm completely extended, and he maintained this extension as he took the racket up. And here's where the problems occurred for Novak back in those days. He would bring the arm somewhat closer to his body, but there was still too much distance between the racket and his head, so his racket drop was not optimal by any means. But instead of taking the racket all the way down, Novak started taking the racket up on his side. And then when the racket reached about this position, Novak would start to coil, bring the racket closer to his head, and get his elbow behind the body. So Novak optimized his serve, and he's been serving better and better as his career progressed. And as I'm watching the Machac match, which surprised me, by the way, I thought that Novak was going to have a tough time against Machac, who's a great player, but Novak played an exceptional match. And the thing that I was noticing in this match was that his serve looked different than before. I didn't know what it was, but just based on pure optics, something about his serve looked different than before, and I thought that his serve in the match against Machac was the best that I've ever seen it. So the differences in Novak's serve are very subtle. Remember when I told you when he initially changed his serve from here to here, Novak for a long time was bringing his racket up to the side, and the strings were parallel to the side fence, and he began to coil when the racket was about right here. This is where he would take his elbow back and turn his chest just slightly towards the back fence. In the match against Machac, what I saw from Novak's serve, and still shots confirm that this is true, is that Novak started to initiate his coil sooner, and there was a different racket and elbow position prior to this portion of the serve. So before, Novak would keep his elbow in line with the torso until the racket came to this level. This is where he would initiate the coil. In his match against Machac, Novak started initiating the coil sooner. So he started turning a little bit sooner, and the elbow started going behind the body sooner, so that when he reached that same position, the elbow was further behind his body. Novak, very similar to Alcaraz, is now starting to coil slightly sooner in his service motion. And this naturally results in a position when he's fully loaded that's slightly more turned compared to the way he was serving before. Now, Novak's speed on the serve was faster than his average. Throughout his career, Novak's average first serve speed is around 115 miles an hour. In the first two sets against Machac, the speed was 120 miles an hour. So Novak is 100% serving faster. Now, how do players serve faster? Well, they can try to hit the serve faster and go for it more, or they can adjust their technique slightly so that they gain a small percentage increase in speed. And the next time Novak plays, I want you to pay attention to his rhythm and compare it to his old rhythm. Novak is turning a little bit sooner. Now, this is very subtle and it's not that big of a difference, but nevertheless, if you coil more, you are going to get more rotation into the contact, and this is going to translate into more power. Now, I've talked about technical differences between the ad and deuce serve in some of my previous videos, and Novak was one of those players who had more separation in his platform stance when he served to the ad side, and he had a little bit less of it when he served to the deuce side. Novak has changed his platform stance positioning when he's serving to the deuce side. So before, you would see Novak's tip of the back foot aligned with the heel of the front foot when he was serving on the deuce side. And before, just like many other players, when he's serving to the ad side, there was naturally more of a separation there. You should watch a video that I made about why players have a different stance depending on when they're serving to. I'm going to link it in a pinned comment. Now, back to the Machac match. If you pay close attention to how Novak positioned his feet on his platform stance when serving to the deuce side, you will see more of a separation there compared to previous years. Now, I will say that Novak has experimented with this particular stance in previous years, so this is not the first time I'm seeing it. However, what I'm seeing for the very first time on Novak is a slightly different loading position on his serve, a slightly sooner initiation of that coil, and a slightly sooner turn, which is naturally resulting in a different position of his racket face. Because Novak is turning sooner, the racket is not going like this up into the trophy anymore. He's now turned backwards and the racket is going upwards while the strings are pointing towards the other side. Now, of course, based on muscle memory, Novak still turns the racket as it's about to drop. Now, one thing that I find interesting on the ATP Tour is that the era of spot serving seems to be over. See, in the 90s, we had some of the best servers in the history of tennis. And then, with the big three dominating tennis for a couple of decades, spot serving was the way to play tennis. Now, of course, Federer is a little bit different because I regard him as one of the greatest servers of all time who could turn up the heat and start dominating with his serve. But essentially, Federer wasn't always looking for the ace. He was a spot server as well. Very similar to Nadal and Djokovic and so many other players that were collecting big titles throughout that era. But what I started seeing in 2024, and now I'm seeing it in 2025, as well, is that we're having more and more big servers on tour. But it's not only that. Players who had good serves before have put in the effort to make their serves great. And these players include Jannik Sinner, Alexander Zverev, and also Novak Djokovic. Novak is serving better than I've ever seen him serve before.